on the wastewater master plan.
Welcome. Good to have you with us today. Appreciate it very much for all the work you do.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for giving us the opportunity this morning to present to you two things, the York Region Water and Wastewater Master Plan update and the update to the Upper York Sewer Solution projects. I would do the piece on the Master Plan update, and Mike Rebo will do the Upper York Sewer Solutions project update. The Water Wastewater Master Plan is a living document. We update the master plan every 5 years for input into our development charge bylaw, which is due in June 2017. Master plan, this master plan update provide the plan to service our target growth of 1.79 million people in the year of 2041. Master plan is highly affected by regulations. So since our 09 master plan, we had major elements in terms of the regulations that had come out since 09. One being the intrabasin transfer permission by the ministry that we can transfer about 105 million litres per day from Lake Ontario across the watershed divide to service growth in Aurora, Newmarket, and East Gwillimbury. There's also the Lake Simcoe phosphorus reduction strategies that came out in 2010. And lastly, we had just complete the Upper York Sewer Solutions IEA, which has quite a bit of stringent regulations from requirements from the ministry. Master plan schedule. So we initiate a master plan update in late 2013. We had issued the notice of commencement back in July 2014. Since then, we had 3 open houses. We had also consultation with First Nations, with local municipality staff, Conservation Authority, Ministry of Environments, and other approval agencies. We are planning to, we had an update to our regional council early this month, early April, planning to go back to our regional council in June for council to authorize us to put the master plan document for public review in the summer. We had quite a bit of extensive stakeholder engagements through the master plan process. We used social media. We had 3 rounds of open houses, 3 meetings with Lake Simcoe Conservation Authorities, TRCA, and the Ministry of Environment. And we had also the 2 special meetings with First Nations, as well as numerous interactions, consultation with local municipality staff. As in other master plan update, we use the standard Class CA criteria to evaluate our servicing strategies, servicing options. We had 2 servicing strategies that we use this criteria to evaluate, one being the Lake Ontario strategy. What we mean is all the growth in East Gwillimbury, Newmarket, and Aurora were 100% serviced through additional supply from Lake Ontario. The second option is a Lake Simcoe servicing strategies. The difference between the 2 strategies are very minor. The Lake Simcoe strategies is still utilizing majority of Lake Ontario to service growth in East Gwillimbury, Newmarket, and Aurora. The only difference is by 2041 we propose a interconnection between the Georgina system and the East Gwillimbury water system to allow some supplementary supply from Lake Simcoe to service a small increment of demand in East Gwillimbury. As I said, we use the Class A criteria to evaluate options. Those 5 criteria being the technical, financial, regulatory, social, and cultural, and environmental. From the public input, the technical and environmental being the considered the most important by the public, and we, as a result, we assign higher weighting to those two elements. Just take a step back and look at what was proposed back in the 2009 Master Plan update, and then I move on to explain what the difference between the 2016 Master Plan update from the 2009 Master Plan update. So the 2009 Master Plan update envisioned that all the growth in East Killarney will be serviced through piping this wastewater all the way down to Duffin Creek Plan. And then on the water supply side, it envisioned that all the water supply for servicing growth will come from Lake Ontario, in addition to the current water supply from the groundwater well at the Yonge Street Aquifer. The idea is, at the time, is drinking water from Lake Ontario supply will return back to Lake Ontario for treatment. So there's the full water balance being water from Lake Ontario going back to Lake Ontario after it's being used and treated. So what's happened since the 2009 Master Plan? A few factors that is are critical in shaping the 2016 Master Plan update that made it different from the 2009 Master Plan. One of which is the completion of the Upper York Sewer Solution IEA, which identified the long-term wastewater servicing strategy for East Killarney. Will be building a new water reclamation center in East Killarney. So no more piping down the York Dome sewer systems and send the wastewater for treatment for discharge to Lake Ontario. Instead, is the reverse, sending the reclaimed water from the new treatment plant to the Lake Simcoe watershed. Another major change is we had a major reduction in water consumptions per capita. Since 2009, the water consumption per capita has reduced by 20%. And based on what we project, project another 20% reductions from now to 2041. Intra-basin transfer, I said earlier, the ministry had provided permission for the region to transfer up to 105 million liters a day of water from Lake Ontario across the watershed divide to service Aurora, Newmarket, and East Killarney. And that set the ceiling and the limit of what supply we can send through the watershed divide to East Killarney. This graph just shows what was the water demand projection back in 2009 and what's the water demand projections now in the master plan, the new master plan update. As you see, by 2041, we had so the top yellow line is the old projection, and the orange line at the bottom is the new projection. So you see quite a bit of change in water demand as a result of water conservation, partly due to the region water conservation effort, and partly due to the new water fixture, that more efficient fixture available in the market. Now go into the 2016 master plan. As a result of the Upper York Sewer Solution IEA, new 40 MLD water reclamation center is to be proposed in East Killarney and will discharge the reclaimed water to the Lake Simcoe watershed. There will be, based on the planning numbers that we received from our long-range planning unit, based on the current number, there will be a further expansion beyond the 40 MLD that is currently part of the IEA studies. And beyond that, there'll be at least another 20 MLD expansion beyond that. On the water servicing side, we will continue to use the existing well in the Youngsville Aquifer. We will continue to service the majority of growth by the Lake Ontario based water. However, in this master plan update, we propose to supplement a small amount of supply from Lake Simcoe to the service growth in East Grimsby and Newmarket. And we propose that will happen in 2041. And we're going to propose to build a 6-kilometer long water main to connect the Georgina water system with the East Grimsby systems. And the supply will be on an incremental basis, and in 2041, it only represents less than 10% of the total water supplied sources for East Grimsby. So some of the benefits of supplementing the supply source with Lake Simcoe water. As part of the evaluation process, we found that there was a number of benefits that why we had chosen to supplement the water supply with Lake Simcoe water. One is less intrabasin transfer, less transfer from Lake Ontario to the Lake Simcoe Basin. In terms of the distance between the Lake Simcoe, the Georgina water system, versus the Lake Ontario, bringing Lake Ontario water to East Grimsby versus bringing the water from the Georgina system, there's a big difference in the distance. So as a result of a shorter distance of transmitting the water age will be shorter. Also, as a result, the shorter distance will require less energy for pumping the water, and as a result, there will be also the fewer greenhouse gases emission. One of the key elements that we had picked the Lake Simcoe strategy is the diversity of supply. So East Grimsby will have supply from groundwater, the Lake Ontario water, as well as a small amount of Lake Simcoe water. So imagine if there's a major disruption of supply from Lake Ontario, we'll still have a supplementary supply from Lake Simcoe. It also provide operational facilities. You have to take water main or facilities out of service for maintenance or for construction. There's another source of water supply. This diagram is just try to illustrate the interbasin transfer and water balance. So this diagram shows water balance, how much water is taken from Lake Ontario watershed and returned back to Lake Ontario, how much water is taken from Lake Simcoe watershed and returned to Lake Simcoe watershed. So the construction of the proposed water reclamation center in 2024 will help water balance as water taken from the groundwater wells at the Youngsville Aquifer, which is located in the Lake Simcoe watershed, will be returned to Lake Simcoe after treatment. However, as the water reclamation center is being expanded in the further future, there will be more reclaimed water discharged to Lake Simcoe. As a result, the proposed interconnection between the Lake Simcoe, the Georgina water system, and the East Grimsby systems will provide us some further flexibility to ensure that the water balance is being maintained. I just want to point out the at the left bottom corner, by 2041, the Lake Ontario water required to be transferred to support growth in Aurora, Newmarket, and East Grimsby will reach about 80 MLD, 80 million liters per day. But it is approaching the limit in a sense, but it's still below the, we still have some buffer below the limit that is set by the Ministry of 105 million liters per day. water reuse as part of the our long-term water conservation update that we just recently updated in 2016. Water reuse is still a key part of the servicing strategy, and it's also part of the integral part of the master plan servicing strategies. So we will continue to work very closely with province to explore water reuse opportunities, including doing pilots to look at using reclaimed water. One applied looking at using reclaimed water from a regional wastewater facilities. And definitely reclaimed water is a central component of the Water Reclamation Center in East Gwillimbury, and it will be opportunity for irrigation and some other purpose, non-potable purpose. There's still quite a bit of work to do, work with the province on water reuse guidelines, to set the regulatory framework, starting with a small demo project. This chart shows the water demand in East Gwillimbury over time. So in 2016, East Gwillimbury total water demand is about only 2% of the York Region total, but it's going to triple over time. By 2041, it will be about 6 to 7% of the total York Region demand. As a result of water conservation, we had a surplus capacity in 2041 compared to our projected demand in 2041. And by projection, we think that the current capacity that we obtained from Toronto and Peel under the current service agreement, as well as the capacity that we had in Youngsville Aquifer, capacity through the Georgina system, we should have a capacity available to service our need to 2041 and perhaps to 2061 and beyond. Lastly, I just want to show you the cost of the master plan programs. So we are projecting that the entire program, water and wastewater combined, will be about $3.1 billion, of which $1.3 billion is already included in existing that regional 10-year capital plan. The wastewater is about three-quarter of the total expense, the water being 1/4 of the total expense. Of these $3.1 billion, about close to $900 million is for expenditure related to East Gwillimbury. And with that, I finish my presentation. I'll pass to Michael Bowe to do the update on Upper York Sewer Solutions. I'll come back to answer any questions. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Rabeau. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Today's primary reason was the master plan and to present an update as to status. However, we thought what a great opportunity to provide an update on the Upper York Sewage Solutions project. So just to start off in terms of the individual environmental assessment, this is a graphic I think I've shown you over the years. We've seen that red box kind of move from the left to where we are today. It's with reserved excitement. We're at this kind of final stage of the individual environmental assessment. Earlier this year, the ministry filed their government review, received comments over the month of February, and now they're putting all those comments together, and staff will take their recommendation to the minister and cabinet for final approval and conditions of the environmental assessment and a way forward for our capital project. We are anticipating that we will have an approval by mid-year. So just I thought I'd bring a conceptual rendering of the facility as to where we are today. This is kind of a drawing of what the facility will look like, basically looking easterly from Second Concession. So it gives you an idea. It's not going to be the exact design, but it's an architectural concept of what the facility will start to look like. So I think couple years ago when we went through some of the scheduling discussions related to the facility, and we landed on the current timeline of 2024 commissioning of the facility. We talked about the efforts ongoing and what we were going to be doing, and we've committed to keep the project going, pursue all the pre-construction activities, and move them forward. So you can see that we've been very busy over the last couple of years and into the next year. We do anticipate tendering works early 2017 related to the YDSS twinning through Newmarket, and that'll be constructed through 17 to 19. We are going to complete probably a 90 to 100% design level of the facility in the next couple of years, and depending on DC revenue and the timing of things, we will be heading for a 2024 completion, but that date will be reviewed annually as we go through our capital budget and revenue review. As you can see, we're advancing major components of the design related to the WRC, the Water Reclamation Center, the phosphorus ponds, as well as the YDSS modifications through Newmarket and Aurora. We're going forward with property acquisition. Our intent is to have property in place over the next 2 years for the facility and linear works. And we're going through value engineering workshops, so a lot of significant effort to move this project along, and we do want to get to a stage where we're ready to go in terms of construction in the coming years. Just to give you an idea of funding, the project is currently in the capital 10-year plan. As I've stated, 2024 completion is the current schedule. We've spent over $40 million to date on this project through the individual environmental assessment process, through some of the consulting efforts and other efforts related to preliminary design and property. Over the next 5 years, we anticipate a spending of about $180 million. Primary focus of that spending will be the force main works of the YDSS twinning through Newmarket and Aurora, but other components related to design, advancing the design, and piloting, membrane testing, etc. And the 10-year plan is about $530 million. That's a number I think we've discussed before. With advancements of the design, we will review this number annually to confirm. This number is what was presented in the individual environmental assessment files. So it's always up for review as we advance design components and look at base requirements for the facility, et cetera. So I threw this chart in just to give you an idea of schedule and the activities that are going to be happening. I don't intend on going through it, but it kind of gives you the next 9 years of work that have to happen in order to achieve the 2024 timeline. And you can see it's a very high level schedule, but again, a lot of components to drive this project forward. It is a leading edge and a new type of project for York Region. So we're very proud with what we're doing and working with the ministry and our local municipalities to push this forward. And you can see that there's going to be a lot of efforts to put forward, and we're going to rely on the collaboration with our locals and the ministry through this process. So I thought I would throw this slide in as well, just given the recent attention to the Holland Landing lagoons and some of the discussion that's been ongoing. I realize that East Gwillimbury staff do have a report coming forward today in relation to the lagoons. Historically, the lagoons were going to be decommissioned as part of the Queensville Holland Landing Sharon YDSS servicing that's currently being completed through the previous master planning processes and environmental assessment process. That was the plan. Until the Upper York Individual Environmental Assessment kind of switched from providing a pipe to the south down to our Duffin Creek plant and focusing on a plant in East Gwillimbury that would then discharge to the Lake Simcoe watershed. With that, there was a change plan for the lagoons that they would stay and would be decommissioned in 2025 or late 24 once the WRC Water Reclamation Center is commissioned. This is related to licensing needs in terms of the environmental compliance approval for the facility. As you know, there are no new facilities allowed in the Lake Simcoe Basin. So the strategy going forward is this environmental license will be transferred to the Water Reclamation Center once it is commissioned. And it will remain as part of the bulk regional trunk system in terms of capacity management. So as we go through capacity assignment processes, it will be factored into those reviews as part of the regional system. Our operations staff are very committed to managing the lagoons. We're going through a cleaning process right now to ensure that we manage odor. I do understand it's a very sensitive issue, just given the nature of how things have transpired in some of the recent media. So we do understand there's a lot of concern, and we're very focused on managing some of these issues. Lastly, I just wanted to give a quick update on the Queensville Holland Landing Share and Servicing, again, strictly related to wastewater, water. We are ready to take flows from anticipated development in East Gwillimbury. So I think mid last year we released authority for registration and permits to be pulled. So at this point, we're waiting for flows and ready to go. I think there was a transportation update last week at the second concession public consultation center, and that's more related to the transportation corridor and bridge construction. Significant investment to date, and we still move forward with some linear works, but everything's in place to accommodate the new development. And that concludes the update on Upper York, and so Stephen and I are available for any questions related to the master plan or the Upper York project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we have questions. I'm not seeing a hand. I have one. I'll start it off. You had mentioned, Mr. Rabeau, regarding the 2024 date, and you said that it was going to be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Are you anticipating that that is going to be pushed back further or moved up further when you review on an ongoing basis?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the current schedule is probably the most confirmed schedule, so 2024 is what we're anticipating right now. At this point, I can't say we anticipate further delay or advancement through the capital budget. This is where we are intending to complete, so that is as much as I could say today in terms of the anticipated schedule.
I just wasn't sure whether you were alluding to the possibility of it being later than 2024, but
No, my comments today, I have no information that would lead me to believe to 24 or beyond.
And you had indicated that the expectation was that the minister's report would be back mid-year, so should we be expecting something by June, July?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the process is ministry staff accumulate all the comments and kind of put together a recommendation. That'll go to the minister. We're hoping that happens by the end of May. So anticipating that early June, the minister has the comments, formulates the package that basically recommends the solution and all the conditions that go with it. That'll then have to go to cabinet. So ideally, and again with a positive result, we'd see an approval with conditions. I'm hoping for July, and that's what I anticipate right now.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. If we go back to the water portion first, maybe we can ask Mr. Fung a couple questions. The slide that shows the 2016 master plan for water and wastewater, and just looking at water at this point, you said by 2041 we'll be relying on about 20% from Lake Simcoe in East Gwillimbury?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the proposed strategy under the master plan update is in the year of 2041 and not before 2041. In the year of 2041, we propose to transfer about 5 million liters of day water from Georgina to East Gwillimbury, and that represents about less than 10% of the total supply sources in East Gwillimbury.
Okay, so the rest of it, is that going to be going to Newmarket and Aurora?
Through you, Madam Mayor, most of the water supply will be in East Gwillimbury, since East Gwillimbury is closer to Georgina.
Yeah.
Some water will filter through its path to Newmarket, but
Okay.
I don't anticipate any Georgina water in Aurora.
Okay, all right, and will that be blended with the existing water systems we have, or will that be completely separate?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it will be blended with existing the water. So I had to emphasize that prior for us to implement this strategy, there will be a Class CA that we had to study along with water quality studies and how to blend the systems before we implement this strategy. So right now is a long-term vision of how we service growth in 2041 and beyond. But before we undertake this strategy, there'll be 4 subsequent master plan update, a major environmental assessment for us to further study the water quality, the strategy before we implement this undertaking.
Okay, and just one last one, Madam Mayor, if I may. You said this, after we go through all of our other processes and environmental assessments, when is the idea of actual construction of this link after 2031? Is it between the 2031 and 2041 timeframe, or is there sort of a couple of years you've got outlined when you need to have this in place to achieve what you want to do in 2041?
So under current proposal, that we need that connection in place in 2041. So I imagine that in order to prepare for the construction completion in 2041, I would imagine that the study will happen sometime between 2031 and 2035, with construction sometime after the 2035.
Okay, thank you. And I can wait. I have a few more questions on the other part of it, but I'll leave the water for right now.
Perhaps we'll deal with the water first and then the wastewater second, and we're all kind of on the same. Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Fung. Further to what Councillor Young was questioning about, the 6-kilometer long water main that you're proposing to build, do we have a sense of what kind of cost you're looking at? Obviously, it would be an estimate since you have to do some studies. I'm just curious to understand how that piece of infrastructure would compare to, for example, drilling another well, another aquifer well, such as you're doing on Green Lane.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the expected cost for the work involved, the work involved a new pumping station and a 6-kilometer of water main connecting the Georgina system and East Grimby systems. Expected cost is around $22 to $25 million. In terms of the supply of groundwater well in the Yangsua Aquifer, the Yangsua Aquifer is already at capacity based on permanent takewater. The ministry had indicated that in order to increase the permanent takewater, we had to demonstrate that the Yangsua Aquifer is sustainable. Based on what our model had seen, we think that the Yangsua Aquifer is at capacity, and that's why for servicing future growth in East Grimby, Newmarket, and Warra had to come from lake-based water, either from Lake Ontario or from Lake Simcoe.
So if your Yonge Street Aquifer is already at capacity, and you need less than 10% of your projected demand of your water supply, where does the rest of that come from? Lake Ontario? Yes,
it's all Lake Ontario. As you've seen in one of the diagrams, Lake Ontario is still the majority of supply to service growth in the 3 municipalities.
Thank you.
Councillor Persicini, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. She stole my thunder. I was going to ask the same question. At the end of the day, you may not have the figures, but what are the taxpayers in for all this stuff that we're going to go in the future? What percentages, that we have to throw back? You throw back to us, and we throw back to the people out there. I know it's probably a crazy question, but I don't know the answer. But is it of all these projects we're doing and so on? But you did steal my thunder, the price. But what would it be if there was any implication of the cost to the taxpayers that need to pay down the road for all this, improvements in the master plan? It's probably in the budget, it's probably in the, in the process. But do you have any idea? So it gives me an idea what people ask me. This is all good. This is terrific. We're moving forward. We're doing the service. We need it. We need to move forward. But any idea?
Through you, Madam Mayor, all these are grow projects that we identify. So grow project is paid through development charge. So it will be a part of the development charge bylaw update and will be paid through developers who develop lands and pay through the development charge. So it won't come from the taxpayer.
Thank you.
Councillor Roy DiClemente?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to ask another question. Mr. Fung, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Fung, you mentioned that you would need to do a Class EA and a further study as far as water quality and so on. What if those studies come back and suggest that, in fact, Lake Simcoe is not a viable alternative for you? What are your options, since you've exceeded your capacity in the aquifer, and you don't have the ability to pull or to transfer as much as you would like to Lake Ontario? What are your other options then, aside from conservation?
So the Class CA will determine the outcome of the servicing strategies. The master plan is only a high-level directions. As you see from one of the diagrams, there's still some buffer capacity for Lake Simcoe supply before we hit the threshold or the limit of 105. So I'm going to go back. As you see at the bottom left corner, the limit is set at 105. So even by 2041, we are at 80. So it's still about 20% buffer. So I would imagine that there's enough capacities to service the build out for East Greenbury. Having said that, the Class CA will determine any additional water sources as to service the need for the growth beyond 2041 and 2061.
I'd just like to talk about the Lake Simcoe piece of it right now, and we've heard about it for a number of months now, something very new and different that we have ever heard before. I can tell you that I am very pleased that we are taking a look at Lake Simcoe. I've been on the Conservation Authority 16 years and past chair, and always had a concern about the interbasin transfer, in that our water was coming from Lake Ontario, and it was being sent. It was coming from our aquifers and being sent to Lake Ontario. So to me, this corrects the imbalance that many people thought that there was for a long time. I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to move forward. I think it's much healthier for our environment and a long-term sustainability for our aquifers that we do have. There's only a matter of time before you continue to draw out and send it somewhere else. So I'm pleased with this. I know that it's a big change to what people have been thinking for a number of years, and the idea of taking it out of Lake Simcoe, it seems so small in comparison to Lake Ontario, but having taken a look at some of the information that's been provided at the regional level already, there's no doubt that there's lots of capacity in Lake Simcoe to make it happen. So I'm really pleased to see that this is moving forward. 2041 will be at the peak of our growth, and by then we'll know exactly what it is that how much we need, the quantity that we need. By the time we get there, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but it certainly isn't reliant on Lake Simcoe. It's just to augment what we do have. So appreciate your discussion with this morning.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not sure that there's any other wastewater discussions, water discussions. So if there's anything on wastewater, Mr. Rabeau is waiting in the wings, and I'm sure that we'll have some questions. Thank you, Mr. Fong.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking at the UISS project delivery 10-year roadmap, and going through everything that's listed out, under regular circumstances, if we had an overlay of what we were previously planning for timeline, how far off are we really from that? Obviously, we don't have the environmental assessment approval at this point. We're still waiting for that, and you're hoping for mid-year. But even getting into the other works that are gonna come from tendering the work, awarding the contractor, starting construction, finally, settling up on the land where we're going to potentially put this facility, how far off are we from what our original plans were? To commissioning?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is a very good question. In fact, I was discussing this yesterday. So first and foremost, the individual environmental assessment. In terms of its impact on our critical path, we do need approval by mid this year. If we don't get it by mid 2016, it is going to start to impact the schedule. The schedule being what I'm about to discuss with you. So right now with the 24 completion, based on what you see here, the best we could achieve with any advancement would be a 2022 timeline. We looked at this yesterday, and if we were to advance works and aim for commissioning where we can service a population, it would be in 2022.
And that's based on if we were dealing with before we found out there was an issue as it related to financing and things of that nature.
Yes, and just further on that, that's as of today. I mean, every day we make a decision that impacts that end date. And as far as I'm focused on 2024, I'm making decisions on that as we go along. So if we step back and start focusing on that, we could push things out where we're too far ahead, that 2022 no longer becomes potential. And that could happen, I'd say, over the next year or two. That would have to be something that's decided.
Now, we look at this project being delivered within a 10-year roadmap, and obviously the region plans on putting money away and setting dollars aside in their capital programs. Are they confident at this point that they have the dollars to meet each of these targets in this preliminary roadmap that you've laid out right now?
To be very honest, I couldn't give you an answer to that. I think the corporate debt management strategy and the corporate funding assessment, that's done at a corporate level. So I mean, from an engineering construction standpoint, we've cash flowed this out for a 24 timeline.
Yeah.
Today, the funding's available to move this forward, but from a corporate standpoint, I couldn't give you an honest answer on confidence. I just don't have the information.
And the only reason I'm asking is I was a little surprised because it was never, or at least I never found, I'm going to speak for myself here, the nail down of when this project would start and when it would finish. I had some impression that it might not even start until 2024, but it seems a little bit more encouraging, and I understand dollars have already been spent. There's actually pipes in the ground which will one day facilitate this, but the work is moving ahead. We are waiting for the EA to be formally, or to be approved, not formally, to be approved, but there looks like there are works that are taking place so that we are around that 2024 timeline for commissioning, 2024, 2025 for commissioning. So, okay, I will leave that portion there at that, and we'll wait and see what happens, if that's fair.
Fair enough.
And the other part, oops, sorry, I am glad that was highlighted here. Well, I'm glad it's highlighted because at least my recollection was somewhat correct, but I'm disappointed that it's the way it is, and that comes down to the YDSS extension not facilitating the decommissioning of the lagoons. I understand the reason why, but still, to me, and I think to a few of us on this council, if not all of us on this council, it was a commitment. And it was a commitment based on the region. It was one which we have promoted before my time here. I think back when Councillor Johnson first started, I think that was one of the proponents to support the growth, was that eventually we would come off of those lagoons. And that didn't happen, and at this point it's not happening, and potentially it may not happen until 2024, 2025. So I think at this juncture, I would still request York Region to find a way to get our community off of those lagoons and service within the YDSS at this point in time, and find a way to keep your license. I understand you want to keep your license, but do you really need to run the lagoons or keep the lagoons at full capacity at this point in time when we know there has been issues there? When the region itself has, I think, has said on a number of occasions, we know it's not the best option at this point. We need to find a way to get these things shut down so that we operate on a full municipal system that is not just set to one particular area that's been causing a problem for quite a few years. So I know we have another report coming up, so I'll leave that one alone at this point. And thank you for your time for coming here, and for both you gentlemen in the region for giving us an update on this very ambitious and expensive program that York Region is going to be looking at till 2041. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I will start with the lagoons and perhaps echo what Councillor Young said in that your slide mentioned that last year one of the large cells was cleaned to mitigate it, and yet this year we had still quite a few very vocal complaints. And so I'm going to suggest that perhaps cleaning that large cell wasn't good enough, since we're still having some odor issues in the community, and people had been kind of hanging on until the YDSS was commissioned. So again, I will echo Councillor Young's request that that perhaps we find some way to get creative, that we work with the folks at the ministry to find a way to perhaps maybe suspend the license or do it's their regulation, and so as residents of the province that we're asking them to find a way to make it work for all concerned. So thank you for bringing that forward for us. Regarding the UISS and the plant, you note that property acquisition is ongoing. I was under the impression that the land had already been acquired, and it seemed to me that if we're going forward and designing it for that piece of land, that we should probably, if we're spending money on a design, that we should probably be securing those sorts of things in place, because if those sorts of discussions fall through, then you're going to need to have some other options in your bank. Can you comment a little bit on that, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Property acquisition is ongoing. There are several properties that are being acquired as part of this project. I think the one property in reference is the main area where the plant's being constructed. And no, we have not acquired that property as of yet. We are currently in negotiations and having the land appraised so that we can try and establish a deal for the transfer and the sale of lands. That being said, we do have the option of pursuing an expropriation process if that's required, which would take a lengthier amount of time than an agreeable sale. However, that could be something that we do pursue. We've made a decision to go forward with the design, and just given the criticality of this facility and its link to growth and capacity in the system and in the region, we've made the decision to go ahead with design and other investigations as part of the project in advance of not only property acquisition but the individual environmental assessment approval. We're fairly confident that we are going to get the approval. We will have conditions that will impact the work going forward. However, the decision to do this work in advance, we feel will pay off in terms of managing schedule going forward and capacity.
Further, if I may. Thank you. A couple of thoughts. One of the things that I had raised when we got the concerns about the lagoons was the idea of odor units. And I know that some of the presentations in the past for UISS have talked about odor units at the property line and that sort of thing. I wonder if, for purposes of comparison, we might be able to get a sense of what's happening near the lagoons to be able to communicate to people, because to me, I don't know what an odor unit is. I don't have a frame of reference, but if you could say to me, in Holland Landing on such and such a date, the odor units were 4. and UISS, the odor units, will be one at the property line. That would help me understand a little bit more, because I think, as you've shown on your slide, you've shown the center in isolation, and frankly, it's in the middle of, I believe it's in the middle of White Belt, so it's land that's slated for future growth. So we want to have a better understanding of what's happening in context, of having that center in context with the larger community. And having that description for us would be helpful. And then if I could, I'll have one more comment, and that is the reclaimed water. You mentioned that you were going to be doing a pilot project, and I think every time you come before us, I ask how you're making out with that, because we're calling it a water reclamation center and not a sewage treatment plant for a reason. And so I think that we need to hear a little bit more about that before we convene, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, very good question. Yes, you do ask me every time.
Yeah, I do.
Just an update on that. We are pursuing reclamation as a key initiative for this facility. We are doing pilots to establish just how it can be reused, where it can be reused, and pilot some different technologies to do so. There are two things that have to be considered when you look at the reuse, and it's kind of the different extremes. From a conventional treatment plant and what we have at the front end of this facility, you're going to have high nutrient water that's coming out. That's the effluent. So that's what's available right now for our reuse program. And we'll be looking at non-potable farming applications to establish this reuse program. So where the nutrients can be reused for growth, et cetera. The further end of the spectrum is really water reuse, as we do have a fairly comprehensive and complex facility treating water here, and we're going to have a high quality effluent at the end of the advanced treatment. But from a regulation and kind of an overall human acceptance standpoint, we're not at the point where we can tie that back into the water system and start reusing it. In fact, we're not even in a position where we could recharge groundwater with the water. That could be the future in some areas of the world where water's in high demand, and they are looking at these applications, and they're doing it. However, I think it would take a lot of work for us in the province to look at water reuse in that form. So right now, the focus will be on farming and sodding applications for the high nutrient water, and that's where our pilot will be pursued. And further, I mean, the plant in 2024 will be accommodated for a reuse program, and there will be infrastructure in place. Just establishing exactly how that's going to look is what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
So seeing this plant in isolation on that diagram, and you've got your product at the front of the building, where does that go? Does it go into the lands nearby? How is the plant being planned for in a context of the White Belt, for example, of the lands that are surrounding it?
So just for clarification, I mean, what you see at the front of the plant here, that's not related to treatment at all. That would just be storm management for the lands. So that's all just managing the site itself. What'll happen is, as you know, the Holland River is a very degraded river. It's very high phosphorus content. So the first benefit from the plant is going to be the high quality effluent after the advanced treatment that will be added back into the Holland River. So we feel over time we are going to do there's going to be a big benefit for the river and just the quality of water that's being that's going north to Lake Simcoe. The other piece will be putting the infrastructure in place so that the water can either be piped somewhere for reuse or trucked for reuse in the local area. So we'll be working with local applications to see where that's achievable, who's interested, and potentially establish contracts and licenses for that reuse program. So that's the way it will be approached.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up on that, we've talked about it extensively about the water reuse here, and a number of years ago when we had a lot of public meetings, that was really important to the public that it be reused. So I'm hoping that staff are going to be innovative in trying to find reuse projects. It's not a sewage treatment plant. It is a reclamation center. and the opportunity of doing something out there, something way beyond what is agriculture and irrigation. We're wide open to working with the region on that kind of a project. The purple pipe, the whole idea of putting some things, putting the water into our fire hydrants and other things that are taking place. There's innovative ideas that are happening around North America and further along, and we want to see that in our community. If not, then it becomes a sewage treatment plant with water going into Lake Simcoe, which is fine. But I think we've got the opportunity on a clean slate here. The other piece of the puzzle, if I can say so, is the land around it. And I'm assuming that the location has been determined.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the location has been proposed, and if you want to say determined, again, subject to the environmental assessment approval and subject to acquisition of the lands. But it has been proposed as the site that's been
Okay,
identified.
so it has been really determined. We had several on a map, and it's now worked down to one that although you haven't acquired the land, there's negotiations.
Sorry, yeah,
taking
my apologies. I think from the environmental assessment process and looking at alternatives and impacts, this is the preferred site. This is the selected site. It has been narrowed down.
Okay, so we all know where it is, and so I go back to Councillor Roy DiClemente's comment about odor units, et cetera, that this is only a portion of a greater piece of land within this area, that we want to make sure that the land outside of this area also is able to be developed in a fashion that will fit with our community as well. So, and you know that. I'm just reiterating how important it is for all of us to make sure that we have a complete community. This is huge to make our community complete. If the York Durham is only going to do a small portion of 7,000, we have a little bit more capacity in the lagoons. Hopefully they're closed, and this will make the difference on building out a complete community. But we want to make sure that surrounding it is not sterilized by having the plant there. In fact, that we're excited to have it there and use it as a model for other communities moving forward. So, thank you. I think, oh, go ahead, Councillor Young.
Just looking at the bottom tagline, critical to supporting growth to 2031 in Aurora, East Gwillimbury, and Newmarket. I get the East Gwillimbury part, but how does Newmarket and Aurora fit into all this? Is it because we'll be taking capacity off where another service which could be provided to them? Or how does that play out?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's exactly correct. It's the offset that it creates in terms of the southern system that'll create capacity for Aurora and Newmarket. So, for example, if we didn't go forward with this facility and we were proposing a pipe to go down to the south, that would be built for East Gwillimbury, Aurora, and Newmarket. So, just similar to that, the offset it creates in the southern system, it'll create the capacity for Aurora and Newmarket.
So everybody benefits.
Everybody does benefit.
That's good. I hope they think of that at budget time. Just with that one, 2031, 2041, what do we take into consideration once we go beyond that? Are we purchasing enough land where this facility is going to be for expansion? Is there an intent that there will be an expansion, or is there a ceiling of capacity that this facility will have, which will potentially take us beyond 2031 or beyond 2041?
So the individual environmental assessment that went forward was based on previous master planning processes, which took us to a planning projection timeline of 2031. So the initial phase is building for growth out to 2031, and in fact, based on newer numbers, will take us beyond 2031. So it'll be constructed in two phases. The first phase will have a small portion, or half a portion, I should say, 20 megaliters per day to accommodate growth to sometime in the 2020s, depending on how that's picked up. and potentially into the 2030s. But then the second phase will be brought on as we get closer to the 40 MLD that Stephen had referred to earlier. It is being built to accommodate future expansion. I think the master plan, correct me if I'm wrong, considers one more phase of 20 megaliters per day. So another third growth to 60 MLD. So it'll take care of your 2051 projections. The pro's going to tell you.
Yes, it will take care of to 2041 and beyond, and the property required should have enough land to accommodate up to 80 MLD, which is double that the current proposed under the Upper York Sewer Solutions.
Okay.
So it's a lot of lands for us to expand.
And then one final question, Madam Mayor, to the wastewater side is, has there been a discussion, or is there in future going to be a discussion where we look at Newmarket, more of Newmarket, because I think a portion of Newmarket will be on this system, Newmarket or Aurora seeing sewage pump north as opposed to being pumped south, to again create less capacity on the existing York-Durham system?
Yes, so currently already there's Newmarket flow going to the Water Reclamation Center. So about 10,000 people from Newmarket currently would be connected to the system that eventually go to the Water Reclamation Center. Over time, there will be additional flow from Newmarket to Water Reclamation Center, but what we see in the planning projection to build out the ultimate 80 megas per day expansion within the existing property should be enough to accommodate the build out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here. Could I have a motion to receive? Moved by Councillor Roy DiClemente, seconded by Councillor Persicini. All those in favor? That's carried. I might suggest, with the discussion that's taken place regarding the